these proceedings are here to see that justice is done. And justice is, as any reasonable person would tell you, the finding of the truth. Only we have a problem here.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the I Don't Belong Here show, and I am your host, Samantha Benigno. I am a behavioral scientist, a career psychotherapist, a sixth-year PhD candidate in clinical psychology, a master's level psychologist and counselor. And today, we are pointing out some important discrepancies between reality and what was depicted in the Lifetime movie Accused, the Karen Read story.
Just behind me is the location of the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe.
Karen Read, you have the right to remain silent.
I loved this man.
Karen, did you kill John O'Keefe?
Karen Read had nothing to do with it.
It just feels like this whole town is turning on me.
She got drunk, she hit him, she left him to die.
They all have their minds made up.
They're trying to fit the evidence to the narrative they already decided on.
It's outrageous. She did not run him over.
It's like I was the only suspect.
No matter how long it takes, no matter how long they keep trying, they will not stop fighting.
Everybody's so damn sure. Burn me at the stake already.
Accused, the Karen Read story. Premieres Saturday, January 10th at 8. Only on Lifetime.
This seemed to not want to piss anybody off. It seemed like the way that they were portraying what happened was to try to paint really everybody in the most objective light possible. So trying to tell Karen Read's story to some degree, but also not pointing the finger at anybody else, right? Not saying, oh, this person did it or that person did it, but trying to be as objective as possible. In doing that, however, some very significant and important sort of themes were completely ignored, and some of how they portrayed the sequence of events is important to, well, correct. And that's because for those of us that are very familiar with this story, we know what they are, and we saw them within the first 3 minutes of this movie airing. But for anyone who's newer to this case or who doesn't really know anything about it or none of the details, and the devil here is absolutely in the details of this story, you cannot try to understand what happened here from a high view. You have to zoom in and look at all of the details, which is what so many of us have dedicated the majority of our time on in the last 2+ years, right? So for anyone newer to this case, there are a few very important details, some ways that the movie portrayed what happened that are completely incorrect, and I think are important to point out because it puts in your head something very false, something very different from what actually took place, and those things must be highlighted. Now, I'm going to focus here on simply 3 critical problems with this movie. 3 portrayals of Karen Read and what happened that night that have to be corrected. So the number 3 most egregious difference between what happened and what the movie depicted is how Karen Read is portrayed. Now, as they are showing in the sort of opening sequence, what happened, what actually took place from Karen's perspective the night of January 28th into January 29th starts with the C.F. McCarthy's bar interaction between Karen and John.
Hey, can I get a vodka soda?
Did it start snowing yet?
No, not yet.
You know, my dad said I shouldn't be out with a blizzard on the way.
Now, one of the things that really bothered me about the portrayal of Karen Reed was that she's like almost a seductress with John. And that's fine, right? Like, it's fine to show her as trying to be sexy with her boyfriend. It's just not what happened. Remember, they're coming back together from having argued all day long, going back and forth in text messages that we have all read. And you can very clearly see how distant they really were from each other.
Chris Albert.
Huh?
A bunch of them down by the waterfall, he says. Do you want to go?
Or we could just go back to your place.
So this was not the state of their dynamic on this night. Not at all.
Look, it'll be easier to go by, have a drink, than come up with some excuse.
Fine, let's go.
Yeah, we're going?
Yeah, let's go.
Right. The problem is that that does not paint an accurate portrayal of what was going on that day and what was going on at CF McCarthy's. And again, this is all important to the story. If you want to know what happened, you have to get it right. And this is something that I personally spent a tremendous amount of time on, going through the text interactions of both John and Karen that morning and all the way through leading up to the night that we are seeing them at CF McCarthy's, and the text messages between Karen Reed and Brian Higgins, which were happening in the 10 to 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the night in question. The reason why this is such an egregious, incorrect portrayal of what happened is because the two of them had been fighting or arguing all day. And John was trying to, by the end of the day, he was kind of over it and was trying to get Karen to just come stay with him for the weekend, knowing that there was going to be this snowstorm coming in. And he's like, just forget about it, come and stay with us. But Karen kept saying throughout the day that she felt like an idiot or like a jerk, just running back to him because she felt that he had mistreated her by hitting her with a pillow earlier that morning. So they had been going back and forth throughout the day. We're not going to rehash that now. I've done that in plenty of other videos. But for today, I just want to point out that the way that Karen and John were sort of portrayed as having behaved at the CF McCarthy's, which is when they first come back together in person after all of these texts back and forth throughout the day. Now, important to this story is knowing that Karen Reed was not planning on staying with John that weekend. She was planning on meeting him at the bar and then not sure whether she was going to go home to her house or stay overnight. And her whole thing was, maybe we are not, the best of us does not come out when we are foursome. When you and I and the kids are all together, it seems to start problems.
Are we seriously having an argument over donuts?
It's not about donuts. It's about me telling the kids no, and you buying them donuts anyway.
We were running all around town, doing errands, and thought I was doing something nice, so shoot me.
Just don't contradict me to them, huh? You're not their mother. I don't need a fun Aunt Karen overriding everything I tell them.
Seems to me like you don't want them seeing me as a mother figure.
Did I say that? When did I say that?
What's really going on here, John? You keep picking all these fights with me lately? And they're always all about something that I'm doing wrong around here. I'm spoiling the kids, I'm reorganizing the pantry, I'm moving the towel.
Ask first!
Oh, I'm sorry, John. Crime of the century.
I just want to be part of the decision-making in my own house. That's all. Look, I want you around. I like it. I'm not trying to push you away. I am just a guy who's set in his ways. And I am trying my best. Now, do you have any more of those donuts? I am a cop, after all.
Charming one, luckily.
Because from Karen's view, the biggest challenge in their relationship was that John didn't approve of the way that she engaged with the kids. He felt that she was enabling, or that she would spoil them, and he didn't like that, something along those lines, right? Without getting into the nitty-gritty. And so she was saying to him, maybe we should just take some time away from being a foursome, and you and I sort of work on reconnecting. That's the very broad overview of kind of what she was saying and how she was engaging with him. So when she enters C.F. McCarthy's, we see that John puts his hand on her back and gives her a kiss on the cheek, but they are not connecting. There's no like making out or like strong sexual interaction at that part of the night. Because again, Karen is standoffish and feeling like she doesn't want to completely give in after having had this argument with him during the day. And of course, we all know that the two of them, their relationship in general, was not at a great place at this time. On New Year's Eve, we have this whole thing that happens where Karen thinks John is making out with a family friend.
Do you want to go to Aruba?
What are you talking about?
Lauren invited us to Aruba. They go every New Year. There's a group of them.
Who's gonna say no to Aruba? John!
Hey!
What the hell was that?
What?
You're making out with some girl?
Oh, that's Marietta. That's Laura's little sister. I was saying thanks.
Oh, with your tongue?
Jesus.
Hi. Nice to meet you. Go screw yourself. Both of you.
Karen, that is...
No, don't talk to me.
As they are trying to help us understand what the dynamic was between the two of them, they do show that. So to give them credit, there is some of that. But it is not evidenced in what happens correctly when the two of them come together. And because this is the opening salvo, this is the picture that they are painting about what happened on the night in question.
Chris Albert.
Huh?
A bunch of them down by the Waterfall, he says. Do you want to go?
Or we could just go back to your place.
It is important to point out this wasn't it, right? There was a lot of tension between them, and it is important to the story because of what comes next. Karen was not lovey-dovey, all was not forgotten. And that's also important later on, because when Karen does call Carrie Roberts, which is another very, ironic maybe, depiction. Carrie Roberts certainly is not painted as Sandra Bullock, who, let's just say the casting for this movie was not what Carrie Roberts and Jennifer McCabe envisioned for themselves. Not at all.
Pick up the phone! Gary, I'm worried. I'm worried John might be dead.
What?
I think he may have gotten hit by a plow. He never came home last night. We were all out drinking and...
Karen, maybe you shouldn't be on the road.
No, I'm headed to Jen McCabe's. Will you help us, please? Will you come? Please, will you come help us?
Let's meet back at John's.
So in this scene, we are supposed to be seeing Karen call Carrie Roberts, but one of the things that makes Karen so sure John would have come home is that in her mind, she had made clear to John that she was going to go back to her house, that she wasn't going to stay overnight after the bar.
So am I staying at your house tonight?
I can think of a good reason why you want to stay at my place tonight. Do another drink, huh?
So there's no way that John wouldn't have come home. There's no way he just passed out on somebody else's couch, not only because he had never done that before, but because he should have been aware in Karen's mind that she wasn't staying over and that he would have needed to come home to make sure that when Kaylee wakes up, he's there, right? So he never would have left his niece alone that night. And that's the thing that really makes Karen totally panic. So yes, the early phone messages from Karen are angry because she thinks John abandoned her again, like he had done in Aruba. But after she wakes up on the couch at 4 a.m., that's when she realizes, no, this isn't him, leaving me. This is something happened to him. And that's why she's so convinced when she says, Carrie, John is dead. If she really does say that, I don't even know if I trust Carrie Roberts' memory at this point, because of the fact that it's been so heavily influenced by Jennifer McCabe and co. But assuming she does say that, it makes sense because she knew John would never have not come home, particularly because Karen wasn't supposed to be sleeping over that night in her mind. Number 2. What happens at the waterfall and the fact that Brian Higgins doesn't appear at all in the story. What we see in this movie, how the waterfall dynamic is portrayed, is kind of funny and interesting, but absolutely not what happened.
Hey, you in? Nice as everyone. Cheers.
Hey, St. John, Johnny.
Hey! You.
Hi. Hey, Karen.
Who invited these losers?
Come on over.
I blame your brother. Hey,
Man, what do you pricks drinking?
Whatever you pricks are buying.
Oh, kiss that mouth?
that's where I know to shut her up.
Hey!
While that's an interesting rendition of what happened, this is the moment when Karen and John walk in the bar. Now, it's very hard to see what's going on here, but we see Karen and John walk in, and actually they split ways when they walk in. And what this video is highlighting is Jennifer McCabe's reaction. And while it's hard to see here, this is actually from the trial. She stands up, she claps, and is very excited, obviously, to see them. We then are going to see clips of Karen standing next to Jennifer McCabe. And this is so that Hank Brennan can show that Jen and Karen were friendly at this time. But we're also going to see the clips that Microdots does such a good job of showing us to explain Brian Higgins' role in this sequence of events, which is completely left out of this night and its portrayal in the movie.
Cheers.
I'm really glad I came tonight.
Cheers. Cheers. Hey.
Cheers.
So am I staying at your house tonight?
I can think of a good reason why you want to stay at my place tonight. Do another drink, huh? Come to my place.
And here is the real image of everybody doing a shot together at the waterfall.
Let's keep this party going. Let's all go back to my place.
Here you go.
All right. Good plan.
Make sure you let those guys know, yeah?
Yeah, I'll let him know. We're all going back to Brian's place. You coming?
Yeah.
Great. Is that Fairview? I'll text you. Really? It's after midnight. Can't we just go back to your house, just you and me?
One drink. Come on, we'll be a minute.
All right.
Stuff. Hey!
So you can see what they got right or tried to depict is that Jen McCabe is happy to see John and Karen. And I think that's probably a little understated in this because Jen was sort of buzzed, it seems. At least that's what we could extrapolate by her behavior, right? She's kind of jumping up, clapping, and very excited to see them. But there's a lot more people at the waterfall than is depicted. The scene is very different. There's a band playing, so there's a lot of activity. And of course, central to understanding what happened that night is the person, the character, the person, the ATF agent, Brian Higgins, and he is just completely left out of this story, soup to nuts. Now, I spoke to Loophole Lawyer about this, and he and I are going to talk more about this tomorrow at noon, so you don't want to miss that. He and I are going to be live at noon to discuss all things Brian Higgins and Karen Reed. But he is left out of this story. Like, he is a non-factor. Now, Loophole Lawyer believes that it's probably some kind of like a avoidance of a defamation suit, or that they can't because nobody's been charged, that they wouldn't be pointing the finger at anybody in particular. But the problem with that is that it can't be told in any type of accurate way if Brian Higgins is left out of the story, because there's no doubt that Brian Higgins is the most likely suspect in this case.
It's nearly 2 minutes to midnight. At the Waterfall bar, the Albert and McCabe party decide it's time to leave. They gather their belongings and start moving towards the door. Chris Albert is being playful with Jen McCabe, hiding her jacket behind his back. He hugs his niece Caitlin goodbye, since he is not attending the after party. John is facing the bar, attending to the check. Karen is engaged in conversation with Karina. Karina and husband Nick have remained supportive of her innocence since the beginning. On the date this occurred, they had known both John and the McCabes for years. As Brian Albert, his brother, Selectman Chris Albert, and ATF agent Brian Higgins move towards the exit, an interesting exchange occurs. We will watch the next 20 seconds uninterrupted, then break it down frame by frame. Let's watch again, looking closer, and try to determine what exactly is happening. Brian Higgins is looking in John's direction. Chris Albert says something to sister-in-law, Nicole, as she steps towards the door. Daughter Caitlin Albert is closest to the exit. Brian Albert enters frame right. Brian and Nicole continue. We see Higgins focused, like a laser beam on John. And Chris Albert's attention has now shifted directly onto Higgins, appearing to sense what he is about to do. Higgins goes to raise his arm and shout to the victim, but before he can even bring it above his waist, Chris Albert aggressively grabs his forearm, preventing it from happening. The significance of Chris Albert's actions cannot be overstated. They reveal clear prior knowledge, an unmistakable anticipation of hostility directed towards John. There is simply no other valid way to explain how Chris would know what Higgins was about to do before he did it. I'm not suggesting anyone intended to kill John, only that there had to have been prior discussion, if not some form of coordinated plan to confront him. Now, we can operate under the assumption that these three men know something about John's future that we do not. Chris grabs Higgins by the arm, turning him back around to face him directly. This unexpected outburst from his brother catches Brian's attention. And Higgins, whipping his head toward Chris, seems just as taken aback by the sudden hostility as we are. Notice that Chris is grasping Higgins' shirt so tightly that you can see tension in the fabric. and as much tension on his face. Chris pushes Higgins' arm down to his side. He fixes him with a hard, unflinching stare. Chris releases his grip. Higgins turns his head toward Brian, deferring to his authority and seeking his approval. But Chris steps squarely in front of Higgins and puts both of his hands on him again. Higgins is rattled. Brian raises his palms facing upward, a universal gesture of confusion, questioning Chris's protest. Higgins continues to fix his gaze on John, peering over Chris's right shoulder. Meanwhile, Chris stands in a posture strikingly similar to that of a bouncer stepping in to defuse a confrontation. Higgins steps back and shifts his focus again to Chris, prompting Chris to release his grip on Higgins' left arm for the second time. Higgins stares blankly. The two men exchange a few words as Chris gestures towards the exit. Chris is trying to assert control over the situation. However, both men turn their attention to Brian Albert as he intervenes. Brian challenges Chris's position with his voice and body, causing Chris to throw up his arms in frustration. There's clearly a disagreement between the Albert brothers. It appears that Chris either disapproved of Higgins confronting John altogether, or he was uncomfortable with him doing it so publicly. I lean towards the latter. Ultimately, however, it is Brian who holds authority and makes the final decisions. Chris is overruled by his older brother. Higgins has the green light and is allowed to continue. Chris submits, but is still clearly on edge. As the brothers settle the matter with a few final words, Higgins presses on, shifting his focus back to John. Even with reduced resolution and a tight zoom, Higgins' agitation is unmistakable. He appears to be incensed, clearly gesturing, "Let's go." He briefly makes eye contact with Brian Albert, puts his hand to his forehead. Chris guides Higgins towards the door, touching his back, using his body as a physical barrier. But Higgins isn't done. Chris watches him closely. Higgins remains preoccupied with John, while Chris maintains a stance resembling someone preventing a confrontation. Pay close attention to the next sequence of frames. You'll see Chris appear to say something to Higgins, likely a command such as "go" or "okay." In response, Higgins shows clear defiance, stepping past Chris and openly calling out to John in full view of everyone. Here we go. Chris speaks and puts his hand on Higgins' back to guide him out for the second time. Now, Higgins will react defiantly, ignore Chris, step past him and attempt to get John's attention vocally and by waving and pointing. Higgins defies Chris's instruction to get going. Chris is not happy with this. His stare is ice cold and locked on Higgins. Higgins sidesteps Chris and is animated. Then Chris turns to look at John to see what his reaction is. But John, still dealing with paying his tab, has seen nothing. Not yet.
And you didn't talk to him about coming over to 34th Fairview? No.
Neither Brian Higgins, Chris Albert, or Brian Albert ever acknowledged what we are seeing with our own eyes. Now, picking up exactly where we left off, there's a few things that happen worth pointing out. First, we'll focus on Higgins. Let's watch it at normal speed, then take it frame by frame. And we'll sync it with a close-up of John to gauge his reaction. Now is a crucial moment to remind you, it's 11:58 p.m. In about 30 minutes, John will be fatally injured. Cue the tape. In 3, 2, 1. Let's watch it again, slow it down, and look a wee bit closer. Higgins is desperately trying to get John's attention, but John still has his back turned. By the time John turns to look, Higgins has shifted his gaze to Brian Albert, likely pointing at Brian while telling John to go to his home at 34 Fairview Road. Then, as Higgins turns back toward John, he sees that John has already looked away, prompting Higgins to abort the next hand gesture he was just about to make. Higgins looks and sees members of the band carrying equipment out, then steps back to give them space to pass. Then, he finally makes direct eye contact with John. He points outside, telling John to come to Brian Albert's home. His posture rigid, and each motion he makes is laced with tension. John says something back to him, then glances over to Matt, who seems to have also witnessed the interaction. Consider how determined Higgins was to deliver the message to John. He endured a tense confrontation with Chris Albert, made multiple unsuccessful attempts to catch John's attention, and deliberately lingered behind the rest of his group, refusing to leave until he was absolutely certain the message had been received. Karen and Karina were so deeply engaged in conversation that they remained completely unaware of everything that had just unfolded around them. John is smiling. Whatever message Higgins was trying to send, it clearly didn't land with the weight he intended. John appears relaxed and confident, an important detail, as this reflects his mindset just before he would enter 34 Fairview Road.
Right? And that's not only because of his text interactions with Karen Reed in the time before this. It's not only because of the way that Karen is ignoring him at the bar that night, and because she deliberately gives him the cold shoulder, deliberately, which is super important, right? Because if he had no meaning to her at all, if she was completely uninterested in him, why give him the cold shoulder? They had had a bar relationship up to this point. Their entire relationship was built on essentially flirting or interacting while drinking at the Hillside, a different bar in Canton, right? So that's what formed the basis of their friendship to this point. So the fact that she's sitting right next to him and she's positioning herself on purpose next to him, but completely ignores him at the same time, is not sending a message to him that he's not important. In fact, it's sending the exact opposite message. It's saying very clearly to Brian Higgins that there's some reason to give him the cold shoulder. If she was trying to send the message that everything was as per usual, why deliberately position yourself right next to him, right in front of him, and not even acknowledge his existence, right? To me, that says something about how Karen felt. That's sort of a guilty conscience, right? That's her, from what I can tell, not wanting to let John in on whatever's going on, right? By putting herself right in front of him in the way that she is, but not acknowledging him, it's sending the message to Brian Higgins that she cares enough not to want John to see that they have any interaction at all, right? And that's really bizarre and very telling. Now, something that Sergio Denaro had said going way back in his analysis of the testimony of Brian Higgins that always stuck with me and that I kept playing over and over in my head because I couldn't quite figure out what it meant. He told us that one of the things that Brian Higgins says when he's being questioned on the stand about these text messages is that he didn't feel ignored. And the way he says it, Sergio Denaro concludes that's true. Now, how could that be true? He does send the well, Karen message, right, at 11:30. Well, like, what the fuck, Karen, right? And it wasn't until recently that it finally dawned on me why it was that Brian Higgins wouldn't have felt ignored. And that's because she was putting herself right in front of him, which actually sends a very clear message, not that she doesn't want anything to do with him, but that she doesn't want John to know how she really feels about the situation. Right? So that is very confusing to Brian Higgins, which actually starts to set the stage more clearly for me as to what may have happened that night with Brian and John. And finally, the number one problem with this movie, how they stumbled upon John that morning and where he was on the lawn.
I saw you guys pull up in front of Brian's.
What?
Yeah, I saw your car out front. I mean, I figured you guys changed your mind and left.
No, I don't know. I don't know. Let's just keep driving. There he is. There he is. What? Where? Stop. Where are you seeing him? John. He's crazy. Oh my God, no!
Okay, so there is a lot wrong here. And this is exactly what the Commonwealth would have you believe. And luckily, because of so many people caring about this case, we finally have information about where John actually was, how far off the road, and how much snow was really there that morning. One thing is for sure, there were not 10-foot snowbanks when John O'Keefe was found. He was not found in the snow, despite what Jennifer McCabe and her buddy, Carrie Roberts, would have you believe. So this depiction of the snow couldn't be farther from the truth. And thanks to Emily C., who just happened to get a video of how much snow there was at 6:40 in the morning on this day, we know exactly how much snow there was in Canton when John O'Keefe was found. And it wasn't 10-foot snowbanks. So John O'Keefe was not found in a snowbank, nor was he found covered in snow. He also was found not near the fire hydrant, but near the flagpole. And if you think about this ridiculous rendition, the lawn at Fairview is about half the size of what is depicted here. This is a tiny front lawn. And where they were was right in front of the flagpole. Literally right in front of the flagpole. And it took me, at least, almost 4 years to realize that when Officer Seraph first pulls up to the scene, for a quick second, we actually get a glimpse of exactly where John's body was. And for those of you that have been following me for a while, you know this because I broke it down maybe a month ago. I am now very certain that these are John O'Keefe's jeans. However, it's blurred, so this doesn't really look like a leg, and it looks like it's way too wide to be, one jean leg. But these are his legs, which we know from previous shots. Now, when we look above, we see that this is Jen McCabe's pants. This is not a fire hydrant, like many people had a hard time seeing this last night. This is Jen on her knees. Her jacket is kind of hiked up. This is her on her knees, leaning over John. Okay. And now we also have Carrie, and it kind of looks like she's hard to tell if she's kneeling all the way or if she is squatting. It's hard to tell because, again, the depth perception is off and the image is blurred. But this is definitely Carrie, and we know that because we can see her fur hood very prominently, right? It appears like these are her knees, and she's kneeling over him, whereas Jen is kind of leaning over his torso, And then it appears like this over here is actually Karen. And it looks like this person is in a hood also, but I don't think they are. It's hard to make out. But it definitely does look like this could be a two-toned fleece. Now, it also looks like this over here could be Karen leaning over John. Could be. Now, she's not in a hood, but she does have a two-toned fleece. This could be her little face right here. Could be. It's really hard to tell. Really hard to tell. Okay. So I think that gives you a pretty good kind of idea of what is happening in this photo. All three women are attempting to offer some type of aid, support, help in this image to the body of John O'Keefe. We can also see that he was not covered in snow and certainly not on the road in a snowbank. He is precisely 8 to 10 feet onto the lawn and right in front of the flagpole. And you can see in this video, in this movie, that he's nowhere near this flagpole. In fact, they have him by the fire hydrant, which is not the case, which is off the property. So the depiction that the movie shows right off the bat about how much snow and where John was and that he was on the street and not on the lawn is totally and completely false. And you've got to get that out of your head if you want to know what really happened to John, because that's exactly what the Commonwealth wanted you to believe. That's exactly what Jennifer McCabe wants you to believe. And that's exactly what the Alberts want you to believe. And that's exactly what did not happen on this night. No way, not even close. Nice try.
It is the defense counselor's duty to protect the rights of the individual, as it is the prosecution's duty to uphold and defend the laws of the state. Justice for all. Only we have a problem here.
I live inside my own world of make-believe.